Basically, dude, same thing that we were doing before. I want to go down the rabbit hole on like training programming stuff because you're the savant for that. I've learned the most from training from you by far. Uh, I was like weirdly kind of obsessed with programming theory and stuff.
Mm.
Like when I got into like not starting strength, but like through that and then after is when I was like, okay, now I want to like learn more beyond just adding 5 pounds linear progression to my 5x5. Like
Mhm.
if this is all it is, I'm kind of bored. So I was like, I kind of want to get weird in it, and that's when I started to learn more about it. And then I realized how much I didn't know, and then I learned the most when I hired you.
Yeah.
So do you want to just do like a speed run of like what you do, your specialty as a strength coach, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. So, been coaching strength training in some capacity since 2013. Initially started in athletic strength conditioning in a collegiate setting, and then I switched into powerlifting in 2015. And then I started working in person in 2017. I've worked with a couple of coaches who've really expanded my programming knowledge. I worked for 6 years with Paul Need, who was a huge boon to like my understanding of programming. Like he's got a very very nuanced understanding of programming. And then I took what I learned from him in combination with what I knew, and then also what I learned from my coworkers at Prescript, and then that's where I'm at. And I think the thing that effective programming gives you is it massively increases your toolbox and your ability to help people regardless of where they're at. And I think that's something that most coaches struggle with, right? Because they only view things through one lens. And I have all these different, models of progression and models of periodization. And I think, like, I'm not a block periodization coach. I'm not a conjugate periodization coach. I'm not linear progression or, you know what I mean? So, being able to help someone where they're at, regardless, right? Because not every programming style is going to work best for every lifter. And also, not every programming style is going to work best for every lifter in every one of their lifts, right? They may need a regular linear progression on something like their deadlift, and they may need block periodization on their bench, and they may need conjugate periodization on their deadlift. So being able to do all of them is how you're going to be able to help your client the best.
That's like from my understanding of like the definition of like actual conjugate, that sounds like conjugate theory programming because you're like you got multiple, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Multiple things simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about conjugate that people have this misconception, and it's technically not conjugate, is it's concurrent, right? Which is you're training multiple qualities within the same training session and within the same training week. So, you have strength, you have speed, you have hypertrophy, and it's just, we had initially thought for a long time during block periodization that you had to have an entire month or a couple of months devoted to just training hypertrophy and then just training, some kind of transitional period and then just training limit strength. But we now know like that was based off of something called the interference effect, which is like you can't train multiple qualities at the same time, but that's not really how it works with strength training. Like, yeah, you can't train for a marathon and then also train for a powerlifting meet very effectively. But outside of that, within the confines of just weightlifting, like you can train those things at the same time and be effective.
Well, and also I would argue the interference effect, everyone thinks it's here, but it's here.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so much higher than what you think. And actually, I would even go further and say that everything below that, where you think it is actually not only no effect, well, not no effect. It's the opposite. It's symbiotic. I would say it's positive. Like
Yes.
the effect they have on each other. It's like, no, you should, what you think is the interference effect down here is actually here. And what you're getting down here, the some type of effect that you're getting is actually positive on each other. So you should be doing that.
And then the last thing, there are very few people in my entire life who train hard enough for the interference effect to come into play.
Yeah. 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 That's a real thing too. It's like you're also, you layer onto that. It's like you're probably not actually training as hard as you think. It's just uncomfortable. You're
Just
like, I'm tired.
Yeah, tired is just under recovered. Under recovered is not the interference effect. Under recovered is under recovered.
Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah, dude, I learned the most, it sounded like same thing for you too. It's like hiring people, hiring other coaches was one of the fastest way to speed run learning. At least for me, that 100% was true because I consumed hours of podcasts, tons of reading, more podcasts than reading just because I like listening or whatever, and lots of YouTube. And then once I hired you, a year and a half or whatever it ended up being,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that was like 6 years of learning compressed into 18 months or less.
Yeah,
Felt like.
and I think the biggest mistake people make too is there's this belief that it's like, oh, well, I need to learn this stuff. Like I gotta know how this works. And it's like the easiest way to know how it works is to do it in your training and then just ask your coach questions. It's not like
Yeah.
I'm gonna read and listen to all these podcasts because they all fall short. And theory is nothing without application. You need to know how to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah, and once I had that like switch flipped in my head where I was like, "Oh, the one of the best forms of disguised continuing education is just hiring a coach for my own fitness." You know, it's like you can sign up for all these certifications and that's great. But if you just hire a coach where you're like, "Oh, I like their shit and I like the way they think, but I want to learn more about how they think." It's like you should probably just hire them because then they can use you as the guinea pig, and you can be that N of one to learn your own shit from them.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like all um I'm trying to remember what the quote is, but it's like all models fail, but all models are useful, or whatever
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fuck
yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah.
Because at
Yes,
the
yeah,
end of the day, like when we and it comes down to this like idea of like a bottoms up or a top down training approach, right? So bottoms up is the program is best suited for you and is made for you. A top down training approach is they make the best program, and whoever they have to put in to make the best program to make a world champion is what they do. And so the problem with theory is all top down, right? Every
right.
block periodization, conjugate, etc., is all top down. But what a coach does for you is bottoms up. And so ultimately, you need to know what works best for you, and you need to know what your heuristics or your basics or laws are when it comes to specific programming, which is why you need a coach. Because if you just run classical block periodization and conjugate, it's going to fall short in some regard, and you're not going to know how to fix that.
Gotcha. The thinking back to my own training with you, I remember being pretty surprised at the time how much training volume you gave me.
Yes.
Because I liked training. And I still like training. So I was like, oh, this is great. Because in my head, I was like, okay, I had this misconception, which I think is quite common and maybe partly true, depending on which circles of strength you're in. But I was like, I like powerlifting a lot right now, but I was like, I don't really just want to bench squat and deadlift. Like that, to me, that is boring by itself. I was like, I want to do that and I want to crush my accessories. I still like bodybuilding training. I like training for things that will support my strength directly, indirectly, whatever. And you had like, 4 sets of some things, like lots of what would argue is like high volume. And I remember being like pretty surprised. Have you always done that?
Yeah. So, like, first program I ever ran was West Side Barbell for Skinny Bastards. And the way that they organized things made the most sense to me because it's like, okay, you're going to train your pressing, but you're also going to train all of your pressing muscles or anything associated with your pressing. And then you're going to squat or deadlift, and then you're going to train all of the muscles associated with your squat and your deadlift. And at the end of the day, our heavy stuff is there to get better at the heavy stuff and be able to express strength. And then everything else is based on building muscle, which we can then potentiate to get better at the heavy stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. Well said. Simple over like just simplified right down. That's what you're trying to do. So going off that, how do you find out, and maybe this is different depending on if someone's a new client or not. I'm sure it is based on the data that you have, right? Because you just have less when they're new. But how do you balance, we have those two, you could put them into kind of two categories, which I know overlap, but you have these two categories, strength and then supplemental or whatever you want to say. And you have expression, you have building or whatever. So how do you balance the two in regards to like fatigue costs and things like that, where it's like, okay, well, we need to train hard enough to build the actual supporting muscles. And to do that, you're going to need to generate enough fatigue, which is just cost of doing business. But if we do that, that's going to mask fitness over here, which is going to suppress our strength temporarily. That's okay, maybe to a degree. Like, how do you work through that?
The only time it matters is in meet, right? In off season, if you
Okay.
use 10% less on your squat, but you are building a lot of muscle, ultimately that's what an off season is for, to allow you to express strength better at the end.
Yeah, yeah,
It
okay.
makes no sense to try to express strength in the off season. And it's based on this idea of adaptive capacity. So adaptive capacity was initially a concept um, moved over from disease science, but it essentially states that like we only have so much water to pour out of that cup into other smaller cups, and if we're constantly peaking strength or we're constantly trying to like really meaningfully move the needle on the main lifts at the detriment of our accessories, right? Like we're so smoked that we can't push on our accessories. We're doing ourselves a disservice in the off season because the amount that main lifts getting substantially heavier reduces your adaptive capacity is much greater than the amount that accessories reduce your adaptive capacity.
Just because of the absolute load difference?
Exactly, right? It's like how much fatigue are you really going to incur on a flat dumbbell press for sets of 15 versus how much fatigue are you going to incur from squatting 500 for a set of five. And the secondary mistake that I think people make is they differentiate between, or they don't differentiate between like you're sore and you're fatigued from doing accessories and you're actually have a reduction in your limit strength from being, and there's this idea of like peripheral versus central fatigue. Accessories are peripherally fatiguing unless they're so heavy that they become centrally fatiguing, right? It's like, bro, dumbbell press, unless you're really good at dumbbell press and like tricep extensions and lat pull down and all that kind of shit, it's like, it's peripherally fatiguing. The muscle is tired. But it has to rise to a certain level of load in order for it to be centrally fatiguing, which is that you have a reduction in performance on everything, right?
Right.
Like you being tired by your third set of tricep extensions just means that your triceps are tired in that moment. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
they're going
that
to be
that
tired
comes with
forever.
like maturity, eh? As a trainer, as a trainee, like that just like you start to be able to feel what that difference is. Like you even pointed out that it's there's an objective side of it where you're looking at performance dips, right? You're like, "Oh, I can't hit this, so, CNS fatigue here more than peripheral, cool, or whatever." I would even argue to layer onto that too, like you can subjectively kind of feel that. It's like I've had it where I've gone into a bench and my pecs are sore and my triceps are sore because I trained them 48 hours earlier, but I smoked them. But the bench is snappy. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, so that's low central and that's probably high peripheral. It doesn't matter. It's like I can still express strength pretty good here. So I'm like, good to go.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of freaky for some people, and I think the mistake that like people who really want to get strong make is they get like worried to push their accessories because they're like, well, what if my back's tired in 3 days for squat or for deadlift? It's like then your back's tired in 3 days for deadlift. It's not going to be
It's a non-issue.
right.
Like, who
It's like
cares?
you're not going to fucking go to failure on a chest supported row 3 days out of a meet, and that's ultimately the only day you actually have to be really strong in deadlift. So who gives a fuck?
Right, right. So going back to what you're saying on off season, then would it be reasonable to say then that your expectations for a client in an off season, particularly a longer off season, 6, 12 plus months, that you're like, hey, we don't actually need to add weight aggressively here. In fact, it might be better if we don't. And then you're looking to just like layer on this foundation over however long. Like you still want to see an uptrend, but that uptrend now looks like a 2 month trend up instead of a 2 week uptrend. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
less
and I
aggressive.
think the easiest way to kind of force progression on a lot of those things is through like the removing of additional constraints, right? So you would go from like a long tempo to a pause, right? To like the competition variation, but maybe tempo again. So like a 4 month progression might look like high bar tempo and pause for month one, high bar pause month two, low bar tempo and pause month three, and then low bar pause month four, and then regular low bar month five. And each time you move the bar further down your back, and each time you take away these constraints, the weight is naturally going to increase. There's no way that it doesn't. And then that's how we run, and that's how we force progression. And then also this idea of like A weeks and B weeks, right? So if you can turn a progression that's typically 4 weeks and you can turn it into 8 weeks, the amount that it's going to reduce your adaptive capacity is much lower, And if we can spend 8 weeks building versus 4 weeks building before we need to deload, then that allows us to just kind of spend time cooking. And the more time we
You're
can
right.
spend working as opposed to not working, the better, right? Because over the course of, let's say, I mean, fuck, if you have 8 weeks and you deload every ninth week versus you have 4 weeks of training, you deload every fifth week, like you're getting a lot more training in over the course of the year. The more training you can get in over the course of the year, pushing the needle meaningfully, the stronger you're going to get over 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I can imagine the challenge that you would have that's probably like we all as coaches have like broken record shit that we say. So it's like I'm assuming one for you is like lifter comes out of meet prep, coming off the meet, whatever you do for them after the initial 7 to 14 days ish or whatever, or next block after that. And then I'm assuming their expectations are probably not ideal. Like they're probably thinking, I need to build, I should be really strong, I need to add weight just like I did in meet prep, but different on different rep ranges. And you might be like, this might look a little different, maybe.
Yeah, well, and it's getting them to understand the difference between something like relative intensity and absolute intensity. So in an off season, the goal is to have high relative intensity, which is the
Okay.
perception of effort,
Yep.
right? So it's like the strain, right? And
Yep.
it's like
Yep.
this is hard. And
Yep.
then in a meet prep, we are trying to bias absolute intensity, which is not the perception of hard, it's the actual weight on the bar.
Right. Okay. So I didn't really look at it like that before. So almost like one of the things that would be one of the traits in off season then would be closer proximity to failure on average, but the absolute loads come down, and then you flip that for meet prep where it's like, hey, if we can actually stay away from failure but continue to express strength with heavier weights, we're doing pretty good.
That's exactly it, right?
Okay.
And the thing too is like I'll give people these, these external constraints, which would be like tempo, pause, SSB. It's like, listen, motherfucker, you can go as heavy as you want. Good luck.
Yeah.
It's still going to be 70% of your max.
Do you use that? Do you use constraint like based variations like that on purpose for people that you know are like hotheads that you're like they're just gonna send it and I need to cap them?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, okay.
And for people who want to push hard consistently, right, that's something, that would look more like a concurrent program, right, where you're giving them a max effort or a really heavy exposure every week. And
Yeah, okay.
then the secret in that sauce is just making sure that the external constraints are aggressive enough that they're still not really able to go that heavy in terms of absolute intensity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's like coaching sauce right there, right? Just like working with their own kind of personality proneness. Where that's where like a client would shoot themselves, if they're programming themselves. Dude, I did that. And it wasn't like the absolute load wasn't even super high because I was weak, but I was doing 5x5 deadlift twice a week.
Yeah,
And I was
perfect.
like, and then I kind of got to the point where I was like, I think I've been training too light, so I just need to push myself harder. Now I'm talking relative intensity there, where I'm like, okay, I actually just need to push harder. So I'm like, I'm just going to do more. So I was like, okay, 5x5 once a week, 3x5 added on, later in the week. Then I'm like, let's do 5x5 twice a week. And I remember tweaking my back, and it was that type of back tweak where you're like, oh, there's no management here, like of just like the total load here across the week. Like this is just retarded. Like what I'm doing doesn't. I can't progress this. Like how do I progress this?
Yeah, and the big thing, each lift is going to have a different fatigue cost in terms of central fatigue. And what you always talk about, and you remember very specifically with your deadlift, is you only pull heavy every other week.
Yeah, yeah, dude, that was interesting actually.
Is deadlifting every other week allows us to have a lower average fatigue cost over the course of the block. And then the secondary benefit is the other two lifts go up more quickly because there's less actual fatigue. And then the great thing about it is each time you come in deadlift, you're pretty fresh. And then it's not like we weren't doing any deadlifts on the down weeks. The down weeks were actually, I would argue, harder mentally than the heavy
Right,
stuff.
right.
Because I was having you do like 12 doubles every 45 seconds. It's like, that's really fucking hard. That is very
Yeah,
fatiguing.
because I remember the primary requirement that you were like you need to do on these down weeks is you must move as fast as possible. So I had this like crazy sense of urgency in my head, like because my thing would be the opposite. This is what I used to have. This is actually a big thing that you helped me with was that I apply to everything now is going to be on the concentric of any movement. Doesn't matter if I'm training for strength or not. Like I need to move it quick.
Hmm.
There's no, outside of like rehab and then maybe a specific variation, like there's probably very few reasons to actually slow down a concentric. So it's like move that thing as fast as possible. And you'll be like, oh shit, I'm actually stronger than I thought. Like I was just moving slow for no reason, and that is weirdly psychologically hard. Like it takes a lot of bandwidth that maybe it's not more, but similar to like pulling 89% for a single or a double or something.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of people. They get on certain lifts, especially like they get too in their head about like I gotta have my elbow here and my leg here, and it has to feel like this. Da, 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 da. And it's like, bro, you're not gonna be able to have that conversation with yourself at 100%.
Right? You mean like their setup is way too that
Well,
like
even
that?
just during the lift, right? Like they may not be putting 100% effort into the bar because too much of their mental effort is devoted into making sure everything's like perfect in their technique.
Oh, dude, yeah, yeah. I went through that. Yeah, I went. It's this is the value of having a coach because I went through that and I was like, I was expressing challenges around that, and then you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'll just stop worrying about it. And then once I stopped worrying about it, I remember that it's like, okay, if I do 12 doubles banded with, you know, 50% of what I used on my up week or whatever you had me do, right? It's like once that timer goes off on my watch every 45 seconds or whatever, I'm like, I have to rip the bar as fast as possible. Like sometimes the bar is kind of crooked.
Yep.
Sometimes my hand is a little bit off. And I was like, this is actually good for me because I'm prone to overthinking that. And I literally just need to grip it and rip it. Like just lift the weight. It does not matter. Like,
Well, and perfect example, right? So I had a lifter for a long time. His best lift in a meet, or his best deadlift in a meet was like 838 pounds, like brutally strong, right? And he's a number one submasters all time in Canada. And he trained like he had a gun in his mouth. He was a total psychopath. And I remember watching him deadlift. I remember watching him deadlift one of his speed sessions when I was training with him. And he had to do like 12 doubles at 545 pounds every 45 seconds. And he pulls mixed grip, right? So there's going to be a degree of rotation imparted in a mixed grip deadlift compared to a regular one.
right, right, right.
And by the end of his 12 sets, the bar was literally turned 90 degrees on the platform.
Damn. So that just means what's that mean? His open hand, he sucks at external rotation or
Yeah,
he
well,
can't keep his lat in?
yeah, one of the things too is there's always going to be a degree of rotational movement imparted on something like a mixed grip deadlift. And it's like, yeah, he was like also extremely muscular, so he generally had quite poor.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, dude, I remember. It's funny you brought up the deadlifting because I was thinking about that earlier. I was like, oh, I'm gonna bring that up because I remember you being like, you're deadlifting heavy every 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, that's no fun. And then I'm like, that's crazy that like I'm not a super heavy deadlifter. So I was like, what like I was you know what I mean? I'm like, what is the thought process here? Because it's not like it's a ton of volume on the up week either. It's just heavier. Maybe a top set and a down set max. I don't know, plus the ramping sets or whatever. Like it wasn't crazy. Maybe just a top set. I can't remember what we did like most of the time. But like it wasn't I don't remember it being like grueling, you know what I mean? As far as like I got to get through all these sets. It was heavy. It was meant to be heavy. And so I'm like every 14 days I was like, "Damn, uh, it was like probably the coolest progression to experience for me because it was perfect. It was like exactly what you want, where I'm able to express on the up weeks, the down weeks I got better at as far as speed and intent, and then the fatigue management there in between. Like I felt fresh for those strong weeks to the point where I almost was worried because I was so used to being sore and fatigued for everything that I was like, I feel kind of too fresh for this. And I was like, well, I keep getting stronger, so like this is kind of ideal. Like,
Well, and it's like every person I've run through that progression, like pretty much every person, like I had a guy who in an off season went from a 600-pound deadlift in a meet to a 720. And he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, dude, you're 285 pounds. Like you can't deadlift every week."
right, right, right. Is that like, do you find that's a common self-programming mistake people make? Is like just doing, they don't really understand how to. layer that out appropriately across a block?
I would say that that is probably the biggest mistake I see people make in programming, just as a generality, is they don't take into account how big they are. They don't take into account how strong they are. They don't take into account if they're on drugs or not. They don't take into account if they're a male or a female, because all of those things are going to change pretty dramatically the degree to which you can handle volume and intensity.
What's okay, I'm curious, what's the biggest difference that you would see between uh like geared lifters, so using drugs, and then like tested lifters as far as programming considerations?
Yeah, so when we think about kind of the mechanism of anabolic steroids, I mean, one, we have muscular hypertrophy, but the secondary thing is we have an on average dramatic increase in something called motor unit recruitment, which is your ability to recruit muscle fibers, which is why they work so well for strength. But it's paradoxical because the more effectively they can recruit muscle fibers, the more fatiguing each rep is.
Yeah, okay.
So
That makes sense.
if you try to train like a drug tested lifter when you're on drugs, you very quickly exceed your capacity to recover and you become very centrally fatigued.
Dude, that's interesting because that kind of flies in the face of common knowledge, which I guess wouldn't really be accurate from your perspective here, where it's the opposite. A lot of people think it's the opposite, right? Where they're like, if I'm on steroids, I can do way more work.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I'm saying?
yeah, and I mean like it's yeah, and I think
Like
that's
you actually, what you're saying is you actually, it makes sense. If you're less anabolic by not taking drugs relative to taking drugs, you actually require more work to stimulate the same outcome.
100%, and then you'll require more work at a more consistent frequency. And then the idea, like, there's this idea of like in a drug tested program, right? Like the exposures are more frequent because you detrain more quickly, and then your heavier stuff is less often. And so you essentially end up in this like kind of moderate to high volume program, high frequency approach, um, which now has made tons and tons and tons and tons of drug tested IPF world champions. And then the funny thing too is we now look at the highest totals in drug tested versus untested, and they're within 100 pounds or 50 pounds. And it's like the argument could now reasonably be made that drugs don't help that much in terms of strength. And in actuality, it's a harder group of balls to juggle, um, because finding that kind of sweet spot is much harder because it's going to be variable on the amount of drugs that you take.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. And you're seeing that gap kind of close, eh, with tested and untested lifters.
Well, I mean, Colton Engelbrecht totaled 26:44 in wraps, which is the highest all time. Jesus Oliveira's totaled 25:40 in sleeves. And you could say wraps account for, let's say, 80 or 100 pounds in your total.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting, eh?
Yeah, when it's you look at the best 165 lifter, right? His name's Austin Perkins. I'm pretty sure he has the highest total all time at 165, and he's drug tested. Granted, he's five foot
Right.
four, so of course
Yeah.
he's going to be good at lifting. But it seems now, especially with the advent of like really high level drug tested powerlifting, the for most people, most of the time, like I don't think you need to take PEDs to get brutally strong.
Right. Interesting, eh? So with your, would you say though that if you're trying to build up the required muscles, like what you're saying before, to support your strength and build up your total in your training over however long, let's just say you're in an off season, you would, if I'm tested and I'm not using drugs, then I would in theory need more than otherwise. Volume. I would need more workload, more training volume from that perspective, or do I need more training volume just from like the strength side of things more so?
You would need more training volume from the strength side of things, and then also the lame thing about an off season for a drug tested lifter is they're going to accrete tissue so slowly that really biasing hypertrophy work isn't really something that we're doing.
Oh,
It's
so you don't even bother because of the opportunity cost.
Yeah, because it's going to deprioritize because it's harder to get stronger, or not even harder to get stronger, but the program's so dissimilar in terms of getting stronger, drug tested versus untested, that in order to turn it into an untested, or if you're trying to use an untested program, an untested lifter, they're
Yeah.
not going to build that much muscle, and then they're also not going to
Yeah.
get that much stronger.
Yeah.
Whereas in a regular off season for a drug tested lifter, they're not going to build that much muscle, but they can get much stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Interesting. Okay. Um, Going back to like the volume thing, where it's like the way that you had programmed for me, where I was like, holy shit, this is a lot of, I'm done my main work and I got a shit ton still to do. Like I'm liking this. Because I liked all that stuff. Now I was like tired as shit for it. Um, but I was like, all right, let's get to work here. But it's like a full other session basically. The um at that point was when I started to realize that I was like, oh, the probably the best powerlifting training, just to generalize, the best powerlifting program is probably going to be what people are calling power building, where it's like it's actually going to be strength work that isn't the bulk, but it's a large chunk. And that's going to differ between all the other things we were even just talking about, different variables and whatnot. But you have to have a large chunk here of bodybuilding accessory supplemental work, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and also the big thing too is if you go to if you go too far down the strength rabbit hole, the other
Yeah.
thing is no one wants to be strong and look like shit.
Right.
You
You want
can
to look like you're strong.
well, and the best compliment you can get as a powerlifter is, "Oh, you don't really look like a powerlifter."
Right, right, right. Because they think what they're saying is you don't look fat.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like people are always like, "Oh, like because even now with my legs not really being that, I mean, my legs not being that big are still 28 inches, but like even though I'm not that muscular in my lower body anymore, they're like, wow, you don't really look like a powerlifter. I was like, yeah, because I did all of the things that would optimize performance in the sport, which is I built lots of muscle, I consistently dieted and bulked, and I gained, tons and tons and tons of tissue over a long period of time. But at the end of the day, the highest level powerlifters all look like that. The highest level powerlifters look like quote unquote power builders, which means that if they look like that and they're the best, you should probably try to look like that if you want to be the best.
Yeah, which makes sense because it's like muscle size still carries over into muscle strength at some point.
Yes, it gives you the
Like a big,
opportunity to be stronger. It's not a one-to-one correlation,
right.
but the chances of you being stronger and you eventually run out of muscle to potentiate and you need to build more muscle.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So who's like, what's your, I don't even think we've talked about this. Like, what is your, because I'm sure your roster's changed over time. Like, who's the type of person that you're working with mostly now, and where are they at when they hire you?
I would say probably intermediate lifters. I still have a couple of very high level lifters on my roster, but the thing that I started to notice is it wasn't particularly fulfilling in terms of, bro, if someone comes to me and they deadlift 750 and then they deadlift 850, I'm like, okay. But if someone comes to me and, perfect example, you, right? We had these limiting beliefs, we had this big misconception of what we were capable of doing, and then we built you up over time, and then you hit great PRs and all kinds of stuff. And the net positive in terms of your training, but also the bleed through effect in terms of your life, you're
Hmm.
like, no, I am a fucking badass. I can fucking crush this. And then for me, those are the people that it's most meaningful to work with because that goes back to like the feelings that I experienced when you had a personal training client who made all these big life changes and got better. Because it's like, dude, that's awesome. Like, I actually helped change someone's life versus like, bro, if you go from deadlifting 750 to deadlifting 850, your life has changed to zero.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, dude, I don't know what the exact would have been, but like the relative change was like the absolute was embarrassing, but the relative change was pretty sweet because I was probably truthfully around 1,000 pound total when I hired you, maybe 1,100, right? So it's like I was able to put on like 2 to 300 on that, which is sick. Where I'm like, and I was that period of time, I'd already started to get more jacked. But because now with your training, what I noticed was now I'm held accountable to push my intensity, right? I can't sandbag. And then, and now I had all this training volume, which I kind of already was doing, but it was just more specific and you were handling it. So it's like, okay, there's a point to this. And now I had this massive intersection of training intensity and volume that it's like, as long as I can recover and not die and not skip sessions, I will get jacked.
Yeah.
Like, forget even about being strong. It's like, I will get bigger. And I did. So it's like, I put on a ton of mass at that time. And I got chubby, but I also put on a lot of lean mass at that time as well once I pulled back. And I was like, holy shit, I put on muscle. This is sick.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, at the end of the day, everyone wants to be like, using strength training as an avenue to like build lots of muscle can be great. Um, but at the end of the day, the reason why people want more muscle is because they want to look better, and they want to look better because they want to have more confidence, then they want to have all these positive impacts downstream in their life. And it's like, I have clients now who are just like just lifestyle clients, right? Like just lifestyle clients. And like, one of my clients, Felix, like he started with me, he was like kind of chubby, right? Like relatively low training intensity and stuff. And, we took him through a couple of bulks, and now he's in his second cut, and he's like, dude, and he's like morphing because his calories at this point are pretty low. His cardio is starting to ramp up. And his protein's super high. And he's like, dude, like, I've never looked like this in my life.
That's sick.
And I was like, yeah, like it's 2 years of hard work, right? He started with me in 2023. I was like, it's 2 years of hard work. But now you're starting to kind of reap those benefits and reap those rewards. And for him, he's like, dude, like, this is nuts. Like, I'm fucking so jacked. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the play. Like, that's what
It's
we should
kind of the
all be
play.
trying to do.
Well, and you know what I was surprised at? I wonder if he would be similar because he might have been similar body weight as me. Maybe I don't know because he might be a similar physique. Like I don't know because I've seen some of his photos before. Because like I was like physically very unimpressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so basically, what I just needed to train hard and eat more food, like as simple as that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And the level at which I needed to train, like I realize how overly simplistic this sounds, but like when you're in it, you start to have light bulb moments. Is like, oh, I'm actually sandbagging way earlier than I think, if
Yes.
that makes sense. Like I like the level to which the level to which I needed to train, and I'm saying intensity, but also training volume and maintain that threshold consistently over time was way higher than what I thought was possible and what I thought was needed, what I thought was required to even get huge. So then I did that, and then I'm like, I get to the end, I'm like, yeah, like everything's sore all the time, way more than before. Like I'm not talking like, oh, my biceps are sore because I did extra 3 sets on whatever. It's like, no, I'm the tendons are sore. Like I have to warm up external rotation now before I bench because like this will really hurt. Like everything's achy, and like you could take that too far, sure, but like I felt fine. But it was like the level to which I was pushing for me was such a relative change to what I was used to. But I was like, oh, that is what is like once it opens your mind to like what is required, you're like, dude, I need to push way more. And then you realize how many people are in the gym doing literally nothing, but they feel like they are.
Honestly, and I think going back to like the coaching part, I think that's a huge component of coaching is like the accountability in terms of intensity, right? It's like, bro, you're not like if you fuck around even in a calorie surplus, you're not going to build that much muscle. You're not going to get that much more jacked. You're not going to look that much better.
Dude, it's worse in a surplus because it's going to be mostly, it really is going to bias fat tissue because you don't have the stimulus from the training to make it muscle.
Yeah, yeah, you're just getting fat for no reason.
Yeah, you'd be better to actually eat at maintenance
Yeah.
or
Well, it's like
less.
yeah, and it's like I remember I did a meat prep, and I was like all of meat prep. I think I was having 160 grams of oats for breakfast, 8 eggs, 200 grams of top sirloin, 4 pieces of toast, and a cup of egg whites. And then meal two, three, four was 450 grams of cooked rice, 250 grams of top sirloin, and then my meal was my breakfast again.
Yeah, yeah.
So it ended up like 6,000 calories. And obviously there was anabolics at play, but I went from 239 to 274 pounds in 10 weeks. And then
Dude, that must have mangled your sleep.
oh, dude, I had like awake apnea. I didn't even have sleep apnea. And I remember I was so big that I would be walking to work, and I would get a calf pump so bad halfway that I would have to like, there was like a bike rack outside of a Loblaws, and I would have to like bend over on the bike rack and like stretch my calves out so I could finish walking to work. And the walk to work was like 15 minutes.
Dude, when you squatted, did you just feel like this compressive ball of muscle?
Well, yeah, very much so, because my stomach would push into my legs, and then I would just get
Yeah.
I would like get nosebleeds taking shit. But what I would also say from that is I ended up dieting down after that 10-week period, and same body fat, and in 10 weeks, granted there was PEDs at play, but like at the same body fat, I went from 239 to 252.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like what? Right? But it's just
Yeah.
like because I was like eating 5,500, 6,000 calories a day and I was training like a psychopath because I was like, well, I got to put these calories to use and I'm not going to be under recovered because I have enough calories.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
magically, I
Hmm.
gained 35 pounds. I probably gained 11 or 12 pounds of tissue, which means I probably gained 20 pounds of fat mass, or maybe 15 pounds of fat mass and 5 pounds of bloat. But made a huge change in my physique.
Crazy. Okay. What we should have said that at the start. For people that would be curious, what are your best numbers?
Yep. So best squat in a meet is 716 pounds in sleeves. Best bench in a meet is 435, and then best deadlift in a meet is 722. Best squat in the gym 725. Best bench in the gym is 440 for two, and then best deadlift in the gym or best bench in the gym 440 for two, and then best deadlift in the gym was 782.
Sick. Were those all in Ottawa?
Yeah, and it was like my issue and my toxic trait was that I would always like do a meet prep, get so strong in an off season, do a meet prep, and it was so much of an increase in strength that I would just get hurt. So I ended up having to drop out of like 3 or 4 meets, because I would just blow something off the bone like week 2 of prep, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, dude, you have the psycho gene. It's good. Like you're made for shit like that.
Yeah, one, it's like I always tell people, I'm like, you want to learn from me and not do what I did. Like I remember January 1st of 2020. Yeah, January 1st, 2020. My old business partner and I were like going to the gym. We take a bunch of pre-workout. We get super fired up. We take other illicit substances, and I was floor pressing, and I tore, and it was 430, and I think I hit it for triple, and I felt my pec tear on the first rep, and then I was like, well, it's already torn, and it's a floor press, so it's probably not going to rupture the tendon. And then I did two more, and I had that conversation with myself during the rep.
Dude, you know what's crazy about that? I mean, that's crazy alone. You know what else is crazy? Uh, that you tore it on a floor press.
Yeah, yeah, and
Like that's imagine you had any other pressing variation in. It would have torn off the bone probably.
oh, 100%. So I was like,
Yeah.
fuck it, whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like my favorite story that Shallow's ever told me was he was squatting and he felt his quad tear on the way up. And it was like a set of three or something. And, because he's a doctor, he does like this mental inventory. He's like, okay, well, I haven't ruptured my extensor mechanism, which means it's not, rectus femoris or vastus intermedius. And then he does this mental checklist at the top in 2 or 3 seconds before his next rep, and he's like, "It's my sartorius." And he's like, "Okay, if it's my sartorius, I can finish this set." And then he did two more reps.
Dude, you know what that is? That is the practical manifestation of meathead meets academic
100%.
in real life, you know? Everyone thinks the intersection is like Jack dude who went to school. No, no. That moment is the intersection.
Yeah, and I think the thing too is like that kind of speaks to this idea of like your actual physical limit is so much higher than your mental limit. And my favorite story about that is, and placebo effect is real too. And my favorite story about that is, I had a Sports Illustrated subscription in high school, which I'm sure you did too, right?
Same, dude. Oh
And
yeah.
there was this story at the Vancouver Winter Olympics in 2010 of this Ukrainian cross country skier, and she fell in the semifinals, and she fractured two of her ribs and punctured her lung. But she made the semifinal or made the finals, right? And team doctor comes in, assesses her. He's like, "Yeah, she's got a fractured rib. We did, some stuff. She's got a punctured lung." And the head coach was like, "Can she still ski?" And he was like, "Yeah, she's just going to be in an immense amount of pain." Head coach goes to her, he says, you just bruised your ribs. And so she goes and she skis and she wins a silver medal at the Olympics and then collapses at the finish line, has to get rushed into surgery.
Dude, that's also the liability of that coach. Imagine that. You're like, oh man, she better not die. Like,
Yeah, well, and it's just so funny, right? Because you start to realize that the that's just a perfect example of like mental limit being so much higher than physical limit, and the fact that I mean
yep,
they're Eastern European, which is probably
yep.
why they have that thought process. But like even my buddy Vagiv, another friend of ours starts pulling mixed grip. He sends it in a group chat. He's like, "Yeah, I'm pulling mixed grip. Actually feels pretty good." And then Vagiv's like, "I'm gonna pull mixed grip," even though he's pulled hook grip for like 3 years and he's very muscular. First rep ruptures the distal bicep tendon, and he like goes in, gets the surgery, bro. Like I think 7 days post surgery puts a bar on his back. 10 days post surgery starts benching. 2 weeks post surgery starts deadlifting the straps. And I was like, dude, aren't you worried that's gonna like tear again? He's like, no, no, no. This is my good bicep. I'm just not accepting being injured.
Dude, I love that so much. There's something to be said about that. I was thinking too when you were saying placebo and all that, that's another lever that you pull when you hire a coach, assuming the coach leads you in the appropriate way. Because it is, and as well as if you can give up ground to like trust what they're saying.
Yes.
Um, so because I found it very helpful when I'm doing an AMRAP or whatever, something where I naturally would like sandbag and be like, that's too heavy. I'm good, you know? And then you're like, no, 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 that like that, you legitimately have more. And I'm like, okay, like, I guess I got to do it again then. Like, I trust that. Cool. I'll do it again. But like, I'm not going to tell myself I have more. You know what I'm saying? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, but if someone else tells me that, I'm like, oh, I know they know what they're talking about. Okay. Then like, I don't know, like I believe you. I can't see it, but I'll trust you and I'll go try again. You know what
Yep.
I'm saying? And like that's huge because then you're like, "Oh, okay." Like I mean, I'm assuming you're not lying. So like I'm going to do this and now I kind of have I might not fully believe, but I kind of believe enough to actually do this again. And otherwise if I was on my own, I'd be like, "Yeah, we're good. Hang it up." You know?
Yeah. Well, and it's I think being able to offload that mental effort too. It's like your mental effort should just be devoted to pushing and trying hard. The mental effort with everything else is like you just offload that thinking to someone who you're paying to
Yeah.
think. And
Yeah, that is huge.
you know, and I think the big thing too is people can make if you just offload that trust to your coach, you can make huge changes in strength, in physique, in all these sorts of difficult things if you just trust in the process and if you just trust your coach. But the moment there's that pushback and the moment there's that like too many cooks in the kitchen thing, it never, ever, ever works. And it actually goes in the other direction.
Dude, it's the same thing when I'm coaching someone through like a fat loss phase. All it's like I guess you could argue like chicken or the egg here, but if I look at the correlation here, all my clients that are the most bought in are also the ones with the lowest bandwidth stress, if that makes sense. Like they understand that they're like, I need to focus on execution. Tim, you do the thinking and all the annoying back end stuff, and then just tell me what to do. Like, just make it simple, make it easy for me. Like, I just need to take action. Just so tell me what I got to do. Like, I don't want to think about the why. Like, I don't care.
Well, yeah, and that's just it, right? Is like being discerning with hiring your coach, but then the moment you hire your coach, there's no more discernment.
Yeah. Right. Like that's actually prudent.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like do your homework. That is prudent to do your deep homework. And then once you commit, it's like you are now in a cult
yeah.
and you've signed a contract, figuratively speaking. But like that's the best way to do it. Because then it's like, okay, just tell me what to do here.
Well, and then you look at the best powerlifting gym in the world, which was Westside Barbell, and you know, Louis would always say it's like it's from like an old Japanese movie, but it was like this analogy of like the ball or the sword. And there's this kid, his name is Daigoro, and his father comes to him and he says, you know, Daigoro, right now you're going to either choose the ball and continue to be a child, or you're going to choose the sword and follow me on a journey into hell. And he's like, you have a choice right now. And then he's like, well, I'm choosing the sword. And he's like, and once you're on this path, you can't get off this path. Like there's no stopping. Once you are on this path, you are on this journey. And that's what coaching is, right? And that was his like shtick at Westside. And then they ended
Uh,
up making for 25 years the best lifters of all time ever across pretty much every weight class.
Dude, yeah. That's one of my favorite documentaries of all time, just for like any movie, film, and in general, is West Side versus the World. Um, the okay, let's talk about drugs for a bit. And then we can sign off or whatever. But with actually that might be a good example because I remember and I think actually it was when Rogan talked to Louis Simmons. Do you remember when they had an interview? I think
Yeah,
Rogan was in Columbus, and that was like JRE wasn't huge then, right? Just us stoners who don't believe in the moon landing watched it, you know. And he, uh, I remember him mentioning that he's like, because I think Rogan asked him, he's like, so do you take steroids still? Like, you're an old man. He's like, yes. Why would I not take steroids every day for the rest of my life?
yeah.
Like that's paraphrasing. He said something like that, and I remember being like, whoa. And that's like an interesting take. And he said it very convincingly with a lot of conviction, like, no, I've thought about this. Like, this makes sense. This is a prudent health decision for me, for whatever reason. But then you have the flip side, and I realize there's different contexts here, but you have the flip side where, and you can go into this if you want, but my understanding is, this might be actually helpful for you to say is like, okay, you're open about using these drugs, PEDs and stuff. There's tons of like misinformation around it. You've used a lot of them. You've also
Hmm.
used very little of them. I
Hmm.
think from my understanding, your philosophy now is like minimum effective dose. Something can like we want to maximize performance while also considering health span,
Yeah.
and that's that is you can do that. I don't know if Louis believed in that or not. I don't know, but like that would at least come off as someone who's on the other end of the spectrum. Like, what do you think about that?
So I think it's everyone's inflection point for like optimal dosing is going to be different. And like you kind of have to put people into these subsets and understanding that like with every decision, like there's choices and consequences. With every decision, like you're gonna run into different issues. Like my best total, I was on 400 milligrams of total stuff, including orals.
And for people watching, that would be, relatively speaking, a low dose
Yeah,
as
well,
far
I
as
mean,
total load.
yeah, I mean, a TRT dose is, 150 to 200. So, maybe double a TRT dose. Now compare that to I had preps where I did 5 or 6 times that.
So 2 grams or 3 grams?
Yeah, 2 to 3 grams.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, and it was like, but the opportunity cost was that my sleep was terrible. I was probably actually satisfying the clinical criteria for psychotic. Um, and like, I just felt, I remember I was like getting ready in the morning one day and I like bent over to put my socks on and I was like, I don't just feel bad, I feel toxic. Like,
Huh.
I feel like my body is breaking down.
Which is pretty accurate from where you would be globally speaking, as far as inflammation and things like that, right? It's like your body is literally trying to detox, but it can't at the speed it needs to survive.
Oh, it was like my face was like a perfect circle. And I mean, I remember I had a prep and the meet got canceled, so I ended up not doing the meet because it was like peak COVID. But I remember like in prep, I was like, okay, this is my first one back. I've hit it hard before. I'm gonna hit it harder than ever before. And I was like, I think I was on 800 test, 400 mast, 400 EQ, 400 deca, and I was like running out of places to put the oil. And I like started pinning my lats and shit. And then I was also taking 50 milligrams of D-ball every day, 50 milligrams of Vanadrol every day, and then I was taking Halo on training days.
Dude, that sounds mentally exhausting.
Oh my god! And it was like I remember I'd have to like I had so much oil that I had to pin that it wouldn't just I couldn't just do it in a 3 ml syringe. So I bought 5 ml syringes. So
That's amazing.
it ended up like 15 or 16 mils a week, and I was like, dude, this
What's the most you've
sucks.
pinned in one, like the most oil you've pinned in one site? Like how much could a site take
So most I've pinned in my delt is I did 3 mils
in one go?
in one go, and then this is how stupid I was. It was my first untested meat prep ever, And then the NPP I had was low concentration. In the test I had was like relatively low concentration, so I ended up being 3 mils 3 times a week. And I would just alternate my left and my right delt because I liked how it made my shoulders look.
You're like, this is like the poor man's synthol, or maybe not poor man's, but like
Yeah,
I'm getting bubbly delts from
yeah.
this.
And like I think I did 5 mils in my glute one time. And then I would like I had had so much at one point that I'd have to do like I'd finish with one glute and then I'd still have more oil on it and then I'd pull it into another syringe and then do it in the other glute.
Jeez, dude. So your kind of case now is like less is more, right? In a lot of ways. So how would when you're talking to, when you're um consulting with like one of your clients who's untested and you're like, "Hey, I think this is probably what we should be doing for meet prep and whatever, off season, whatever it is." Actually, meet prep's a better example.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Okay, dude, usually, my last meet prep was with another coach or myself. I ran this dose. This is what I do." And then you're like, "You don't need that to be strong. And also, I don't want you to die and I want you to feel good," and whatever, all the cases that you have for why they should do less.
Mm-hmm.
And when you present that, I'm assuming in most cases, maybe not all, but most cases, they go, "I just gonna do what I want to do though here." Like, how do you get the client bought in that you're like, "Hey, dude, you don't need the dose you think to get the drug, to get the performance that you want."
Well, the big thing that I always kind of like go back to is I go back to like the progress that they made in the off season.
Okay.
And like I have a client right now, and he just squatted a triple PR, and it's an all-time triple PR, and he's on actual 150 megs a test. And his
Right.
prep, he's usually going like 500 or 600 tests, 350
Yep.
trend, like orals, all this
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then he's like, and it's funny enough, like I brought that up, and he came back to me, and he was like, "I feel like if I take too much, I might actually just get hurt because I'm so far ahead of where I was." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, if you're already squatting 600 pounds for triple in the off season, like what you want to triple 640 at the end of prep, and then you want to squat 683." I was like, "Your best squat in the meet's 628. Like that much of a delta up, like you're gonna get hurt."
Right. Right. So he's bought in at that point. He's like, "Okay, I see it. I get it."
Yeah, and and then even funnier, right? Like I'll have clients where they'll send me the cycle because I never design cycles for people. I'm like, I'm not. I used to do it. I'm not doing it now. I'm like, dude, if you fucking blow your kidneys out, I'm not going on the
Yeah.
transplant list so you can have mine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I had a client. It was like his first meet back after a surgery, and he's like, "This is what I want to run." And I was like, "I would suggest not doing that, but you're a big boy. You can do whatever you want." And he had like a couple of compounds that had interference, right? Like he was taking
Yeah.
219 Nors, like he was taking Deca
Right.
and Tren.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's like 2 weeks in, he's like, "Dude, I feel horrible. Like I'm nauseous in the morning and I have no drive in the gym, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, "Yeah, remember when I told you to not take 219 Nors?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "That's what that is." He's like, "Oh." And then he dropped one of them out. 3 days later, he's like, "Dude, I feel so much better." I was like, "Yeah, that's why you listen to me, dude."
Right, right, right. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand, I think, what you could call, I guess, second order effect, maybe, of steroid use. Because I think a lot of people have this very bro-y way of looking at it, where it's like, I take drugs, I get big. True. But, like, if you're going to take a cycle, you should probably have some knowledge around the biochemistry of those compounds, right?
Yeah, well, and it's just, and then also, if you as a coach can avoid them doing dumb shit at the outset, you don't need to have them have that experience on their own.
Yeah,
Right? It's like if
yeah,
he had
yeah,
just because he's never done this before. If he had just been like, "Oh, I'll just not do that, and
yeah.
I'll just listen," he would have not had that problem.
This, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I forgot what I was gonna say. You can go.
Well, this is what I was going to say was so I've probably done like above what I would call my cruise around TRT. So between 150 to 225 tests. Okay, so I would say that's my norm. It's like anything beyond that we'll call a cycle. I've probably done that 4 times in my life, I think. So for at least three meet preps and then maybe somewhere else, right? So probably four. And I understand this idea of like performance when that is the goal. how you feel matters, but matters less because we need performance.
Hmm.
That is what matters. It's not necessarily what all that matters, but it is number one. So if we need to do that at the expense of things below it, that is a win. That is good.
Hmm.
So I understand that, but I think like and I'd be curious your thoughts here because there's like something to be said about when you feel better, you probably perform better.
Hmm.
But if you're too good, maybe not because we're not getting the performance output. You know what I'm saying? Like how you balance like drugs, for example, because I probably, but I won't say for sure, but I will probably never run stuff like that ever again, at least higher at all. You know what I mean? Like I'll
Hmm.
probably never do that because I feel so good at taking TRT that I'm like, why would I do more? Like I'm already looking good, feeling good, making progress, enjoying the process, sleeping good, mood's good, energy's good, health is great, blood work's awesome. Why would I change this? You know, like I actually arguably, in my opinion, if I was going to go into a competition of some kind, whether it's strength or not, and testosterone helped with that, I'm probably actually at kind of close to my optimal dose because I feel so good. Like everything else is in check.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's so many other levers you can pull, right? And it's like even in a strength context, right? Like my best total came on 400 milligrams of total stuff, which is 1/5 or 1/6 of what I did before, and I felt good. I didn't have issues with appetite. I
Okay.
slept well. I didn't
Yeah.
have any anxiety or stress or whatever, right? Because like a lot of people forget too with higher dose stuff, you are just kind of wired for sound all day, and you can't get out of sympathetic.
I don't like that feeling, dude.
No, no, and like for a couple of days it's fun, and then you're sitting on the couch and you're just like you feel like you fucking did methamphetamines, and you're like, dude, I
Right.
hate this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I because I have friends who are very 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 strong, and we've all had the same experience, which is that we went a little fucking nutso retardo in our early on in our career.
Yeah.
And then we were like, well, I feel really bad doing that. So I'll just take less. And then every single prep, we took less and less and less until it's like, bro, this is like maybe double what your TRT dose would be.
And then you realize you're like, oh, my optimal dose is 17% of what I thought it was at when I was 21 years old.
Yeah. And then also just understanding that it's like people want to be these really, really high level lifters and they want drugs to backfill to be the ability why they're a really high level lifter. And it's like, no, because you're not tracking your food, you're not doing your accessories. And it's like, if you took less, but you did all of those things perfectly, you'd be further ahead.
Dude, I made a video on this because it's amazing how many people, like, I say that I took 175 milligrams of test and how people see my transformation and they're like, oh, that's because of the drugs. And you're like, and I made a video because I'm like, if we're technically going to like be very truthful here, it helped a non-zero amount, but 175 milligrams test is so insignificant from a fat loss perspective that it's like, no, it's literally like you would be so surprised at how many guys are running 500 plus milligrams at your commercial gym and they look like shit. Like really, they don't have cap delts. They have a massive gut. They just look like your average gym goer that's been, got a little bit of muscle but a lot of fat, and they don't really look that great at all. And they haven't made progress in 5 years, but they run 600 milligrams of test.
Yeah, well, and then also like the big thing that I think people forget is how much, like, let's say you have someone who's high normal and like before they get on drugs, and then they get on TRT and they're still high normal. The only difference in their capacity to recover is going to be that through heavy training, they don't have a reduction in their hormone production. That's the only difference. If you have high norm, if you take a guy who's high normal before and he's on high normal afterwards, the only difference is super heavy training is not going to impact his hormonal production. So when things get hard and he gets further into a phase,
Yes.
that's when it'll start to be a little bit better. Like when you look at someone like you, right? You're what, 180, 185 pounds, right? It's like, yeah, like that's not like the more tissue you accrete, the higher the total amount of drugs necessary to keep that tissue. But like on TRT, the amount of tissue that you're going to accrete is pretty akin to what you would accrete drug free. It's about the
Right.
same.
Especially when you consider that my fat loss phase was 12 weeks. It
Yep.
wasn't 6 months. Like, so time in the deficit as well is going to drastically increase the amount of lean mass you probably will lose. And it's like 12 weeks, natty or not, like maximize protein, nutrition, sleep, training. It's like you're probably going to be similar ratios.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because you're not going to get that reduction in hormone production as a natty guy. Or sorry, as a natty guy. And then the hormone production in a natty person isn't going to be impacted in the 3 month fat loss phase.
Right. No, it makes sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to call it there, dude.
Okay.
We'll do another one of these. What I want to do, because I just did this last minute with you, because I was like, oh, I figured out Riverside. I'm gonna get questions
Okay.
from people, and I'm just gonna rip questions, and you're just gonna go off.
Deal.
Oh, yeah, that'll be good. Also, if you have anything that comes up that we would talk behind the scenes on, which we will occasionally around training and whatever, just save it, bookmark it, and then we'll hop on this and record it,
All right. Deal.
and we'll just go. Okay, cool. Tell people where to find you, and then I'll stop recording.
Okay. Do _Kodiak Barbell on Instagram. All of our services are available on kodiakbarbell.com. And I have a YouTube, which I think is just Stuart Locke Kodiak Barbell. And other than that, you can't find me anywhere else.
Thanks, dude.
All right. See you, Bubba.